and welcome to the Jim Ruff Show. Today my special guest is Don Miller. He's an old friend of mine, but we've known each other for a really long time. And Don clearly is an expert in the Quaker process. I mean, he's former clerk of the Richmond, Virginia Friends Meeting. And he's also on our board for our work with Dynamic Facilitation. So Don has studied process forever, I think, or thought about it. And so I want to share a little bit about how the Quaker process is been around for about 350 years at least, and a lot of my work has come from that. And so Don, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, before I get started in sharing this, tell us a little bit about the Quaker process. What is it? What happens in a Quaker business meeting?
Yeah, so you have to distinguish somewhat between the meeting for worship, which happens every week, and the meeting for business, which is a once-a-month thing. So in a meeting for business, well, we do all sorts of things like make announcements, and so forth. But we transact business. We make decisions about things, and that, to me, frankly, more than the worship, that's the really interesting and more meaningful part of being a Quaker.
Cool. And of course, this is the work that I do, is about helping people think creatively and collaboratively and coming up with group answers. And the Quakers kind of pioneered that work as in their Quaker meeting process of coming up with I think they pioneered the word consensus. Do you know that?
If they did, I don't know that,
oh.
but it's, I think what you do with dynamic facilitation taps into the same principle of human behavior, really, that the Quakers I don't know if they lucked into it, or George Fox and others had a key insight at the time that was new. But I think you're tapping into the same thing the Quakers are. One thing interesting about the Quakers, when the Quaker movement got started in the mid-1600s, a key component of it was that within each one of us, we have the capacity to have a direct link to God. And let me just say that by God, I mean whatever you intend it to mean.
Yeah.
Okay? We have traditional people with traditional God beliefs, and we have a spectrum all the way to atheists. And among the atheists, if you talk to them, they have a wide spectrum of how they view things. But taking that broad view, each of us has a direct link, and no one has an authority over that link. So at the time, the bishops thought they did, and if you went against the bishop, you were breaking the law.
You mean the bishops of the English church?
The bishops of the Anglican Church
Yeah.
In the mid-1600s.
Yeah.
And so the Quakers, at first, were meetings for worship, is what they were. And they were spreading, but as they got more meetings, they found that they needed a way to conduct business.
Yeah.
Okay. But they absolutely did not want any one person to be the leader. And did not believe in that, because that sort of gives you the bishop again. In fact, so the idea of a business meeting, when there's a decision to be made, the basic idea is that we're all in this for the same purpose, and that is to discover where God is leading us on this issue.
Yes.
It's okay. So the Quakers have a big head start on our society, because the Quakers go into the meeting understanding that if I go into that meeting, I know I may have a strong opinion about what the best thing to do is, but that's getting that opinion taken is not the point of the meeting. The point of the meeting is to discover where we're being led. And so I'm just as much responsible for really, really understanding what you're saying and what they're saying and putting it all together And in order to do that, we have a clerk. So the clerk leads the meeting, facilitates the meeting. The clerk has no role in deciding what we're going to do, but leading the meeting. The one job the clerk has to do, though, is after hearing enough people speak, the clerk's job is to discern what they call the sense of the meeting.
And so he or she would reflect that back to the group.
Yeah. The clerk might say, I've heard lots of things, and it seems to me that the sense of the meeting is that we should do A but not B, and then check. Everybody okay with that? Check and see. And it's a responsibility out there if someone is not on board to let it be known, and then we'll do some more work.
Yeah.
And we don't make a decision until we reach that point.
For everybody.
As a group,
Yeah.
we all agree this is the direction we seem to be led, even though it's not quite what seems to me the best thing, but clearly as a group, we're being led that way.
Yeah.
And I buy into that.
Yeah.
And if I buy into that, then I support that after it's done.
Yeah.
No undermining.
So it seems to me what's happened is that the Quakers have been the pioneers, and then out of that has come into the secular world a sense of the consensus building process that is taught, and they have a tighter standard. They say, okay, well, two people can block the process, but anyone can block the process, and you can have maybe two people abstain or something like that. And so they tighten down the rules. But it's still everybody's job to keep, to somehow keep that spirit alive, although it doesn't have that religious tone of where God is leading or to serving God.
Quakers reject the idea of consensus.
Perfect. So do I.
For several reasons. First of all, it means different things to different people.
Yeah.
Consensus to a lot of people means most everybody thinks we should do this.
Yeah.
70%, we have a general consensus here.
Yeah.
And that's not what the Quakers are looking for. And secondly, a consensus process in most situations is a bargaining process. I'll give up this if you'll give up that. Okay, this we can run with. That's kind of a lowest common denominator process.
Yeah.
Quakers are seeking the highest common denominator.
Yes.
So we're not interested in trading off. We're interested in walking out with a solution that nobody thought of when we walked in, that incorporates all of the real concerns of everybody and addresses them.
Yes, and that, of course, that's what dynamic facilitation seeks.
Absolutely,
as well.
absolutely.
And
So,
the difference is, one difference is that the Quakers start out with a community of people that are committed to these values.
Yeah.
And
We
then-
attract. That's who we attract
Yes.
to our meeting,
Yes.
and so we have a big head start.
Yeah.
And another thing is that in dynamic facilitation, in most applications, you have a group that is struggling with something, and so you have meetings. And you work on those things and hopefully discover that higher ground decision that everybody's excited about. So you go from A to Z, A being, let's come up with let's try to figure out what the problem is, let's come up with, what would you do, what would you do? We do a lot of what we call seasoning of a issue before it ever gets to the meeting for business. So we have committees that are charged with looking at an issue, looking at alternatives, and coming to the meeting for the business meeting with a proposal or with some alternatives. And that's just a starting point, because more often than not, that's not where we end up. But a lot of that, we call that seasoning, and it helps a lot. You're way down the road towards being able to reach that decision everybody's seeking, as opposed to starting from scratch. You're taking on a tougher job.
Yeah. Yeah. And because with the DF, the people are walking in the room and they don't know what the problem is maybe. They're just angry about something, and it's just starting with wherever people are, whoever people are, and hopefully you get more than one session to carry things forward. But the sense of following God's will is still there. We do it in the sense of helping the energy emerge in the room. In other words, if somebody's got energy like wants to yell at somebody else, well, we're going to go with that energy, but we're going to help people to own it and see what's really behind it as much as possible. So, but we're trusting the energy will lead us to where we need to go as a group, and hopefully at some point everybody will just go, yeah, that's what we need to do.
And that is so important for even more reasons than people think. Most of us have experience of the person that throws a monkey wrench in the process by bringing up something that nobody really wanted to talk about. Oh, you're just messing us up.
Yeah.
But very, very often, that's the most important contributor to the whole process, because they're the one that's seeing something nobody else saw, even if they're not able to express it very well.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, where's the really innovative idea going to come from? It's more likely to come from a minority view than from a majority view.
Absolutely.
It's going to come out of a minority view. And so it's really important to seek that minority view. That's crucial to the group's process.
So tell us an example. You were the clerk for a while. Take us through an example of the Quaker process.
Well,
at work.
You know, some things turn out to be the toughest nuts to crack that seem like they ought to be pretty straightforward. One thing that it took us, I was clerk for 2 years. That means that I facilitated the business meetings and tried to state the sense of the meeting and so forth. Okay, so a brief thing on the structure of Quakerisms. We're a monthly meeting. We have a business meeting once a month. And there's a collection of something like 50 or 70, I'm really not sure how many monthly meetings collectively make up a yearly meeting called Baltimore Yearly Meeting. And it's called a yearly meeting because that group has a business meeting once a year. And they're not over the monthly meetings, but they're just an opportunity for monthly meetings to come together and have information flow both ways. Okay? Well, Baltimore Yearly Meeting is part of a big umbrella group called Friends General Conference. And these are all monthly meetings all over the country that conduct their business the way we do, or conduct their worship the way we do, which is worship in silence, listening to that tiny voice inside, and if you feel compelled to speak from what's coming to you, you stand and share it with the group and sit down, and people then just soak up what you said. Okay, that's a unprogrammed meeting. All right. Friends General Conference, all unprogrammed meetings. Another similar umbrella group, Friends United Meeting, is different. They have a pastor. They're much more like a traditional Protestant church.
Oh.
Baltimore Yearly Meeting belongs to both. Friends United Meeting has a policy that says they will not hire, you can't work in any position in that organization if you are living with someone, in other words, sharing a sexual relationship with someone who's not your wife. So think about it. If you're gay, forget about it.
Yeah.
You know, if you're single, forget about it. Okay. So our meeting was one of the leading organizations around that started marrying gay couples back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And we've been doing it ever since. And we have quite a few gay, especially lesbians, in our meeting, and they're fantastic. They've opened my eyes totally from the 80s to now.
Yeah.
So you might imagine.
So you got these two types of Quakers, what you're saying.
Oh yeah.
Two totally different. One very conservative, one
Yeah.
one completely
in the way they operate. And the ones that have the more traditional, they have more conservative views about things.
Yeah.
And in my view, much more restrictive views about things.
Yeah.
One of them is homosexuality. They're against it.
Yeah.
And so you might imagine that the gay people in our community, in our meeting, might object to being part of an organization that has those policies. So the way this came up was in the context of approving a budget. Every year, we, in addition to giving our contribution to Baltimore Yearly Meeting, we made a $300 contribution to these two large umbrella groups, Friends General Conference and Friends United Meeting. And in discussing the budget, someone said, why are we giving $300 to an organization that wouldn't let me in it? Good question. And so people, took their turns bashing FUM and saying, I don't want to be a part of an organization that does that. And I'm clerking the meeting. I'm clerking the meeting, means facilitating it. And then it seems like we're moving, that there's a sense of the meeting right there in front of us when Barbara Meyer stands up and says, if you look at the history of Quakers, it's a history of people splitting off, having a disagreement, splitting. So now there are 5 or 6 different wings of Quakers, and it's a shame. It would have been so much better if we could have worked out our differences. And I just don't feel comfortable, because we have something we don't agree with them on, just cutting and running, just splitting from them. So there you are. I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to split. Mm-hmm. So I think the one good thing I did was recognize and say that. I said, okay, I think we have a sense of the meeting that everybody agrees on, which is that we don't like giving money to that group, and we don't really like splitting either. That the differences we have over which of those two is a priority, as higher priority. But we're not there, so let's set it aside and we'll come back to this. All right, so some number of months went by, and it came up, and we were nowhere. So I just went to Barbara, who brought up the issue about splitting, and someone else who had supported that. And I went to some of the lesbians who had said, I don't want to be part of that, and said, I want you guys to get together and come back to meeting and tell us what you all agree we ought to do. And they had their meeting, and they came back, and they said, we want to take that $300 and earmark it for members of our meeting to engage with Friends United meeting over this issue.
Nice.
Everybody said, that's it.
Yes. That's a principle of the Wisdom Council. I hadn't thought about that. That's exactly
it's so
what
similar.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's really nice. So you had so you convened the combatants in a sense, but to come back with a recommendation to the whole group.
But they all had to be behind that recommendation.
They all had to be behind it. Yeah. And that worked.
Absolutely worked. They were thrilled. They were all sides so excited about coming out on a strong end on that. And a key part of that was that we didn't force ourselves to walk out with a decision at the end of the day, the first day.
Yeah, you allowed yourself. That's one thing about the Quakers process, it seems to me, is that it allows that open-endedness. It's not like there's an end point. It's like there's always, hey, we'll table it, or we'll come back to it.
Yeah, occasionally we had something recently where there really was a deadline. And we just rise to the challenge. Yeah. Okay, we really do have to decide something, so what can we come around that is the best we can do now? And we did it. Yeah.
And when you said decide, it struck me, because what I've done is, of course, as you know, realize that it isn't about deciding. It's really about choice creating. Like, you created a new choice in your work. And that's what Quakers do, I think, is that they want that quality of choice creating
it's like
to be there.
Create an environment in which a good solution arises out of the process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, we just have a few minutes. you're an expert in both dynamic facilitation and the Quaker process. How do you see them coming together or being different? Or how do you, maybe there's a role for dynamic facilitation in the Quaker community, or what?
I think that, well, Quakers are a religious organization, and the general world isn't. And but I think that this idea of discovering where God is leading us is exactly what the other groups are doing too. You just can't talk about God. But I don't even believe in a traditional view of God myself. But I think there's something about us in which that will arise. I don't know why that happens, but if we really talk to each other and listen to each other and we speak authentically, that will happen.
Yes.
And I don't know the explanation for it, but I know that it happens. So I think it's in many ways the same thing. It's just that you start with a disparate group that don't have that foundation of that the Quakers do. So you have to do, on the front end, you've got a lot bigger challenge. But I think it's critical to the success of dynamic facilitation to be able to get that group meeting more than once, so that you can allow that process to happen. It's hard to start from scratch and 3 hours later have this happen.
Right. A lot of times you have to do that, but yes, that's not the objective.
Yeah.
Because the nature of the process of talking and thinking affects everybody and creates a we, creates a spirit of we.
Okay. Are we out of time? Do we have another minute?
We're okay.
Okay. So I wanted to mention one more thing that I think does relate to what you do, but is a common source of not really believing in our process, people not accepting our process, is they say, well, yeah, but what if you get that one person that just says, I don't care what you do, I'm not going to go along, I'm blocking it. Then you can't get anything done. And that is not true. It's the job of everybody there does not have the privilege of blocking. First of all, if they're blocking but not engaging honestly in the conversation, they're not part of the meeting.
It's discounted.
Discounted.
Yeah.
I've said that myself.
Yeah.
You're not participating in the meeting.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so that's one thing. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is that
there's a spirit, there's a spirit of authenticity that has to be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And honest engagement with others. And that's the same with DF, is it?
Yeah, you're going to face that same guy.
We're going to face this, we face him all the time, yeah.
Yeah.
But the difference is that we can be really pretty strong. I was really surprised at how strong you were, but we can be really strong at helping them recognize that and choose whether or not they're going to be engaged or not.
Oh yeah, I don't mean you're not participating, meaning leave the room.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want us to listen to what you're saying, you've got to tell us what you're thinking.
Yeah.
You've got to engage.
Yeah.
And then if you really have a concern and you've engaged honestly,
yes,
we'll stop and work on it later.
And of course, what the DFer does, the dynamic facilitator, they will say, well, tell us your answer. Let's say you're in charge.
Yeah.
Let's come right down to the answer. Don't let's hear, what do you want us to do? What do we do? And just kind of drive them down to that authenticity without them having to say, yeah, I guess I'll be authentic. It's just helping them to just kind of say what's on their mind.
Yeah, but you don't leave them in that state of I won't do this. That's not good.
Right. No.
Okay, if it isn't. What is.
Right, exactly. Right. We're going to help them understand what they're saying are concerns, and those concerns are shared by everybody.
Yeah. And
now, how do we overcome those concerns? What would be the answer on the other side of those concerns?
Yeah.
And
and that's great. And the other thing about this, about someone being able to stand in the way, one of the differences between consensus, which really implies everybody agrees, to sense of the meeting. Sense of the meeting is not everybody agrees, except that it means everybody agrees that it seems like this is the direction we're led.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite seem right to me, but I can see that's where we're going, and I agree to get on board. So.
Yeah, I stay clear of that word agree, but I like the way you switched it around and made that.
Well, I'm talking about a thought,
Yeah.
not necessarily a verbal process,
Right.
but how we think about it, you
Right.
know. And if I feel strongly enough and
Yeah.
I've engaged, I can say, wait, let's hold off.
Yeah.
But,
Well, see, what I'm getting at is that in DF, in order to help people get to that space of authentic engagement and seeking what's best for all, I want people not to be in that place at all of agree, disagree.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so I want to steer clear of that whole mentality, and I would, but I might ask the same kind of question about. So it seems like most everybody's heading this way, except maybe some other people have these reservations or something like that.
Yeah, and often then, no problem.
Yeah.
You frame the sense of the meeting is that we should do this, and that there's still a couple of things that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe what we do? Maybe we'll refer that back to a committee to look at those little
Yes,
things.
yes.
So it's not like you have to tie up every loose end necessarily.
Well, the Quaker process, of course, is absolutely beautiful, and it's the core of people coming together. It's kind of like I use a half circle process with the facilitator helping everybody face the problem together, and it's like the Quakers kind of, but it's more desirable, I suppose, to have choice creating emerge in sort of a circle process, and that's kind of what I think of as the Quakers, is that because they have the advantage of having everybody have shared values and the longer time frame and the already solid community and I don't know, some other things too, but they can be more in a circle process, and each person takes more responsibility maybe for noticing that we're not quite in that choice creating mode.
Yeah, in fact, that's a really good point, because that's a big advantage Quakers have. When I'm clerking a group of 75 people, you know, not 12.
Yeah.
But sitting out there are 10, 15 former clerks.
Wow, that's great.
And everybody out there has just as much responsibility as I do for seeking the sense of the meeting. And so, you know, it may be that I'm in one situation, I'm not quite getting it, and someone else can stand up and say, well, clerk, please, it seems to me the sense of the meeting is this.
Yeah.
I say, oh,
That's good.
yeah, great. yeah.
So
There's a
don't go
I don't
too
know if this
far,
is a
'cause
joke. What's that?
Don't go too far, because
yeah.
we've only got a second or
Okay.
two.
There's kind of a semi-joke that the Quakers tell about themselves or to express who they really are, is that people think that the Quakers eliminated the clergy. And the truth is, the Quakers eliminated the laity.
Ah, nice.
And the joke is that a new person to Quakerism comes in and sits down at the meeting for worship, which hasn't quite started, and he says to the friend next to him, "When does the service end?" And the friend turns and says, "Friend, the meeting ends at 12 o'clock, and then when we leave, the service begins." Okay,
good.
old Quaker joke. Yeah.
All right, so my good friend Don Miller, and thank you very much, Don.
Delighted.
It was a kick. Okay.